Hey guys, we've got another astro video for you today. We're going to be doing an image of Messier 51, M51, which is the Whirlpool Galaxy. If you know the Big Dipper or Ursa Major, it's just off the back end of that, and we'll show you where that is precisely in the video. Coming up next, we'll show you the final image, and then we'll walk you through some details of how we took it. So for today's video, I am here by the way, I'm just going to control the PC directly and show you the mount moving. So we'll slew it about. And this is the right ascension direction. So this is the direction the star's moving. And the mount will track in this orientation throughout the night. When I'm looking for a target, I also move it in declination, which is this up and down direction you can see moving on this second axis. That's only done when setting the telescope up and to correct when there are unexpected movements. So I'm just going to spin this round so it's pointing over at the far side of the observatory, and then I'll be able to come in and show you inside the scope without the reflections on it. So we'll just spin this round. Okay, so you're currently looking down the inside of the telescope tube, and there's a torch here at the bottom of the tube to illuminate it so you can see what's going on. I'm just going to zoom you right in, and down at the back there you're actually looking at the red filter. So I'm going to change that to the next filter, which is green, and you'll see it rotate and bring in the next filter in the chain. So this is the filter wheel in action. This is our blue filter. And then we have our filters for luminance, which just lets all the light in. Hydrogen alpha, which we often use for red. Oxygen 3, which we use for green. And then sulfur 2, which we use for blue. We sometimes change the order around for those three. And the last one's an empty filter slot. So we'll go back to filter 1. Which is our red filter, and that's the filter wheel in action. So that will be changed often several times during an evening to capture different things. I'm just going to zoom back out again, and we'll try and show you how this is set up. So that's the inside of the telescope, and you were looking right down at the base of that. I'll just pull you back out again. So this is where you were looking down at the front end, just up in here. The next thing I'm going to show you is the automatic movement of the Bartonov mask, which is the gold piece of plastic on the top. So as you can see, that's spun around into place. This is an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to focusing at night. I run a script here which gives a 1 second pulse out, and that goes from the Raspberry Pi to the Arduino that's on the floor, and it tells that Bartonov mask to either drop down in front of the telescope, like so, and then I can focus on a star, and then when I've finished the focusing process, I run the script again and it will return that Bartonov mask to its original position, and then I can start imaging. I have made the mask configurable, which I will demonstrate. So you can manually move it wherever you want it to go. And then I've got a sequence you can press to set the start and end points for it. And then when I tell it to actuate, it will return to those locations. After 5 seconds, it will turn off and save its position. I'll return the scope to its home position, and it will do that automatically. So I've clicked a button called park, and the scope will park itself now. So this is moving all by itself. Hopefully it won't crash into us. Only just. Okay, I'm going to pop you back outside the observatory for a minute. And then from this position, you'll be able to see what the Bartonov mask looks like. So we'll just execute that script. So you can see this pattern here of a cross coming in and down. This is one that I designed myself and 3D printed, but this shape is what gives you the diffraction spikes on a star to let you focus it. And then we'll zip that back out the way by running the script again. And then obviously you're just looking straight out the tube and you can take your images without this being in the way at all. The reason I've made all of this is so that I can sit inside and automate the process of focusing on a star. Okay, so I've just zoomed in on that star. Now with the Bartonov mask in place, what we should see is instead of that star there should be 3 lines which will help us to focus. So there's another image. There are 3 lines there, one going horizontally through the centre and 2 at this angle across. Now what we're looking for focus is that the gap between the middle line and the top and bottom line is the same. So at the minute I would say it's a little bit closer to the bottom than the top. So I'm just going to tweak the focus a small amount. Still got a little bit more. So I'm doing tiny steps. It would be almost impossible to move the focus at this smaller distance by hand. I'm just looking to pull up that centre line just a little bit closer to the top line. So you've got a really even spacing between all 3 lines. So that looks pretty well perfect on focus. That's actually focused on the hydrogen alpha filter. I'm going to move it to the red filter, which should change the focus automatically. And I'm just going to double check that's in the right place. Okay, you can see a very clear difference in the filter, but that is also focused. So that's a bit about the filter wheel and the Bartonov mask. For M51, the Whirlpool Galaxy that we've just taken, we were using 3 filters, red, green and blue, so traditional colour filters that you would associate with a normal image. We did also add in the hydrogen alpha filter, and we've mapped that on top of the red channel as well, which we'll walk through in the editing process. Okay, so to show you some camera settings, we will log in over VNC, which is the method of connection we use to talk to the Raspberry Pi, which is outside in the garden. And we use this tool here, which is called K-Stars. K-Stars is a piece of software that that can be used to connect to lots of devices and pull a load of astro gear together. So within that, we use ECOS, which also hooks onto something called Indie. You don't need to know about most of that stuff, but it's essentially the way of linking to all the devices that we have out there. Our camera is the one we're interested in here. So this is the camera we use for imaging. It's made by a company called ZWO. It's a charged coupled device, CCD, and it's called an ASI 1600mm Pro. We also use the ASI 224 MC, which is a colour camera. That's the one we use for guiding. But for imaging, we'll use this one. One of the plus points about the 1600 Pro is that you can cool it. So the chip runs at a temperature colder than ambient. So if I turn that on, I can set that to a target temperature. At the moment, it's at an ambient of 25 degrees C. I can cool that as low as -20 degrees C now, no problem at all. And by cooling it, you remove a lot of noise from the image. So that's something I do on every session. I run at -20 degrees Celsius. So that's the first thing I do actually when I power this up, is start the cooler here. I choose an exposure time, so all our images are made up of multiple exposures. I typically use 300 seconds, 5 minutes, and I'll take something like 4 to 6 hours on each filter. So I'll choose a filter, and I will say how many pictures I want it to take. So I've just put some typical values in here. So 5-minute exposures, 6 hours worth, so 72 shots. Always takes me a while to figure out that math. And gain of 139 and offset of 15. These are camera-specific parameters. They're to do with sort of signal-to-noise ratio of the camera. The file name that it produces I configure, so I might prefix it with red underscore for a red filter. And then all the file names use timestamps and various other bits to... once I've filled out all my settings, I will add it to a sequence, and then I can save that into a wider schedule that will run the whole thing. So that's the bulk of the camera settings for the imaging camera that we use. Okay, so we'll start with the folder structure I have. So each target is numbered. This is the Whirlpool Galaxy, and this is my 12th attempt at it. There's a folder for each filter within this, and if we go into, say, the red folder, you'll find the FITS files, which is the data for each 300-second exposure with a timestamp, and we get a series of those that are captured throughout an evening. We then combine them together in a stacking process, and you get these additional files made, and the resultant output is this TIFF file, which is an uncompressed image. We convert that to 16-bit data, and then these are all stored in the root directory here. So we've got 4 filters and 4 TIFF files. So we'll start by opening those. So these are all quite big files. They're about 60 megs each. The first thing I'm going to do with each one is independently levels and curves them. So Control M is curves and Control L is levels. So I do Control M to bring up curves, and I just start bumping the curve up at the bottom end and then pull it back down in an S shape at the top end. And that's bringing out all the faint detail, but not blowing out all the stars. So I'll do that a number of times until I start to see the object. You should see in the center of the screen here the whirlpool starting to appear. And once we've boosted that up to the point that the backdrop starts getting really quite grey in colour, we go to Levels, Control L, and bring the black point up. You can see where the data actually starts, so we go towards that. But I try and keep this tail of data at the front end until much later on in the process. So we'll just boost all of the red, green, blue and H8 images in the same way, and then come back. Okay, so here are the various images. So we have the blue data, the green data, the hydrogen alpha, and the red data. So now we're going to put all of those as different layers in the same image. So the imaging camera outside is a monochrome camera. It's black and white. It will only record black and white data. We then put the filters in front of it to capture the relevant colours. So what we're going to do first is select the red filter. We could choose any of them. Select all, copy, and Control N for new in Photoshop, and make an RGB colour image. In the channels, we're going to paste the red data into the red channel. We will then go to our green data, select all and copy, and paste that into the green channel of the image. And finally the same for the blue channel. So we now have a colour image made out of the 3 black and white images with different filters. You'll see that the stars are not aligned. This is the same star taken on different nights with different filters. In a perfect world, the filters would be parfocal and rotated perfectly. With my setup, I have to align the images once I've taken them. So I'll line these all up now by just moving the layer around until they overlap. And I may need to do some rotation as well. Okay, so you can see that I've now aligned the red, green and blue. There was a lot of rotation required to do this. And with each of the channels turned on, we end up getting an image that looks something like the Whirlpool Galaxy, which is lovely. So the first thing we'll do is just crop out all of these edges. No one wants to see this on an image. So we'll keep the crop quite large still, but keep all that data in. The first thing that becomes apparent is there's quite a green fuzz in the background here that will need to be dealt with. So if we turn off the layers and start looking at them one at a time. So this is our red layer. That's our green layer, you see the fuzz, and that's our blue layer. So we didn't get the levels the same. So the levels of this red channel, there's a bit of a gap. The tail's gone now, but there's a gap before the data starts. So I'll pull that in a little way, and it's gone very black. I'm going to do the same thing for green, which has got a lot more to go, which is why we had all that fuzz in the background, and the same for blue. And then with all the levels starting at the same point, we should have a more balanced final image when I turn them all on, which we do. Now we can start manipulating the image on the macro scale now by changing the RG and B together. We independently process them, and now we're going to process them as a whole. So it's just boosting levels and curves again. So Control M for curves and Control L for levels. And it's just pulling up as much detail as we think we can get out without blowing things out in the middle. Okay, it still looks like we've got quite a lot of green in there, which we do. So I'm just going to do the green levels separately. Okay, that's a bit better. So we've got quite a nice dust effect here, which is good. You'll see a sort of reddish hue in here, And we haven't dealt with, we'll just close out the blue filter and the green filter and the red filter, because we've got all of those now. So we have got to merge in the hydrogen alpha data, which is these stars mainly in the spiral arms of the galaxy. So they will fit nicely into this image. We'll get the red channel, select that and copy it, and create a new image with it and paste it. So this is just the grayscale image, so it's a grey image because we only selected red. For the hydrogen alpha, I'm going to try and, well, I'll drop that on top of the new grayscale image, and then we will align it like we did before. Okay, so we've got the two images on top of each other. The bottom one's the red, the top one's the hydrogen alpha. The blending of these two images is what's going to make this work. So if I turn the opacity right down, we're looking at the red, and if I turn it right up, we're looking at the hydrogen alpha. Okay, so we've set our layer to an opacity of 62%, and that's a case of trying to bring through the detail of the hydrogen alpha in certain spots, but not lose all the background red data that we've captured already. Now, generally, red in astro imaging is a bad thing. You get a lot of light pollution that manifests as red, but there's also a lot of red in the target. Now, in this specific target, there is red in the spiral arms of the galaxy, but there's a lot more red in the stars that are picked up by the hydrogen alpha layer. If I bump that right up and just look at hydrogen alpha, these bits would be very red. Unfortunately, they're getting flooded by all the background red, which we're picking up here, and I'd like to bring out those details. So by adjusting the slider up in terms of the opacity, I can choose where to highlight the red. And it's not just a case of more colour is better. It's having the right colour in the right places. So we'll have a play with this. Now we've got those two layers together, I'll duplicate them and I'll merge them, and then we'll copy that back into our original image as our red channel. Okay, that's dramatically changed the image, as you can see. So before and after. Now what it's done is we've got red, but we've got it where we want it, on the spiral arms of the galaxy and on those stars, which is much nicer. Before, we just had red everywhere. So that is actually better. Now, because we've had to do another alignment, there is a slight issue with crop again. If you look at the difference between the red and the hydrogen alpha, we've got quite a crop to do. So we want to be above this star here, that's fine. And we want to finish the crop just above this star at the bottom right. So we will crop accordingly. And we have data for all of that. You get some feathering around the edges in certain places, so I'm going to drop that in just to get rid of the really black points. It's nice to have some coloration in the sky as opposed to bringing it to completely black. So this is really the starting point for where we're working with the image now. We'll now do a final crop, and this will be the intended final image. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at each channel individually again, just see what they look like. So red is okay, green, bit bright, blue, okay-ish. So we'll probably pull the levels a little bit on green, and then we'll go back to looking at the whole image, all the channels. We'll do more levels and curves, just seeing how much we can pull up. Okay, so I'm going to stop pulling down the top of the curve now, because I'm wanting to brighten these stars that we were stopping from blowing out to complete white. Okay, we've probably gone as far as we can go there. So I will do levels independently. So I've selected the red channel with Alt 3, and then I'll do Alt 4 for green and Alt 5 for blue. And I'm just pulling those in individually because they're still quite different. And if you change them as an overall, you can get undesirable effects. So I'm going to pull quite a bit of green out the image now. I'm going to do curves on green only and pull that down. Okay. And levels on green as well. That's better. So we're starting to get a more natural looking image now. This dust that you get around objects is definitely worth preserving in images. And you can see another little galaxy here. And another one here. First thing I'm going to do is have a quick look at star size. So we're going to move into more traditional image processing. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer and we'll start modifying it. So if you go filter, other, minimum, that will take the star sizes down. So before and after. Now I don't want the full effect, so I'll drop that back a little bit, just to a point that I think it looks better than we started with, but not unnatural. So that's at 27%. You can still make out these couple of galaxies down at the bottom corner quite well. So I'm happy with that. I'll then duplicate the layer, a quick selective color, image adjustment, selective color. And I'm going to be looking at the center of the image. In fact, I'm going to zoom in and do this. So we're just looking at the detail of the galaxy itself. And it's largely artistic, this part of it. So it's you changing the sliders, seeing if you like the effect it has, and applying it. So this really boosts that hydrogen alpha content of the spiral arm. So I'm going to take the cyan right down on the reds. The magenta will also affect this. So as usual, I'm sliding the sliders right the way to left and right to see the effect they have. It's quite small on this, but it is boosting the red if I increase the magenta. So before we started, it looked like this, and with the selective color, it looks like this. So it makes quite a sizable difference to the overall image. Now this is a small target, it's very far away, so it is quite a small area of the image that is the focal point. Because of that, when you zoom in very closely, you see quite a lot of speckling and pixelation. We will quickly run this through Topaz, which I like to do sometimes on the smaller targets, and see if we can increase the detail in the center of the image, but we won't be affecting any of the stars surrounding it. So I'll quickly do that. Okay, so Topaz has selected automatically the standard AI model and some parameters for the noise and sharpness. I'm going to change that to low light, and you can see how it's trying to find patterns in the spiral arm detail. Severe noise can sometimes work, not in this case. So I think standard is probably giving the best results. We will turn off their settings and pop everything to the minimum. So if we experiment with the sliders, on the noise slider, if I pull that right up to max, it's artificially dulled everything down. The stars have all changed shape and it just looks unnatural. With the sharpness, if I push that right up to the max, you start pulling out some detail. It's probably detail that isn't there, and again the stars start to become funky shapes. So you do have to be very careful with this. A little bit of noise reduction is fine, and a bit of sharpness increase is also probably going to be fine. Okay, so if you imagine these two merged together, it's probably something like what we're after, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, so before sharpening looked like this, after sharpening looks like this. You probably think there's not a lot of difference, but then we zoom in right on the target, and that's the sharpened image, and that's what it looked like before. So all the stars are losing their shapes, and it's wholly unnatural. So we'll switch the layer on, then we'll get rid of everything by using the bucket tool. Now we're looking at the original image. We can use a brush with a white color to start bringing in some of that detail. 75 pixel brush, opacity I'm going to drop down to 20%. And I'm just going to start feathering in some of the detail around these spiral arms. But I don't want to bring in the full star shapes. That's quite important to me that we keep these as they are. So we've pulled out a bit of detail in the center and around here. That's a nicer image. We've kept all the stars as they should be. It's starting to look okay, that one. I'm going to duplicate all the images and merge them into a single layer, because I'm still in a position where I want to be able to roll back to my changes at any point. So I'll start manipulating this, but I can fall back to my workings if I need to. So I'll use levels, and I'll quickly go through, and I can see that red's got a little bit of a tail before the data starts. So I'll see what happens if I start getting rid of that. That does clean up quite nicely. The background just drops its redness. Green, there's still some green in this background I'd like to pull out, so I'm going to move that one up. That's better. And blue, that's also got a bit of a tail. If I pull that up, it looks too red though. So I'm only going to do that a small amount, so just 4. Now, I have got quite a dark background, but I don't mind that. I like it. I'm going to do filter, noise, and despeckle and see if that helps. Okay, almost no difference, so I'm going to undo that. I'm just looking to see if it deals with the pixelation effect I get here. I don't have to deal with that. It's whether I choose to or not. I like the galaxies that we've got here and here. This star's quite nice. This one's quite bright, but okay. Same with this one. And obviously the focal point here. So we've got some good bits in this image. I don't really want to crop in an awful lot further than that. There's nothing going on in this bottom section, and I could lose that top star if I wanted to. So that's the only crop change I'm thinking about. We'll see what that would look like if we did something like this. Okay, so I want to bullseye the image. I want the center of this galaxy to be on the center point, and I could achieve that by losing that right-hand star that's quite blown out as well. So I could make that the image and lose the 2 bright stars, maintain the 2 galaxy and this orangey coloured star, and I think that will work quite nicely as an image. Okay, I think the galaxy itself will tolerate a bit of vibrance and saturation. So image adjustments, vibrance, and I'll see what happens if I start boosting that up. Okay, you start to really bring out this detail in the dust lanes, which is nice. That's at a +61 vibrance. The saturation, you can go for a really artificial, very saturated image. I quite like that sometimes, but I'd like to localize it if I do that. Okay, so I quite like what it's done to the Whirlpool. I don't like what it's done to all the stars in the background. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer, and then I will make a large vibrance and saturation change. So before and after. Now, the center point, the focal piece, really for me benefits from this. It looks much better. However, stars up here look better for me there without the change than with all the coloration. So what I'm going to do is just create a mask on this layer, and I'll paint the whole thing black and get rid of it, and then I'll brush in with white in the center, and I will use a feathered brush and a 50% exposure, I think, and then I'll just bring in all the center, but I will not bring in anything beyond sort of the spiral arms of the galaxy. Okay, and then if I turn that layer off and then on, so you can see we're not affecting any of the stars around it, but we're getting all the benefit on the galaxy, which is nice. Okay, I'm going to merge everything now and give us one image because I'm quite happy with where we're going. And I'm just going to do another quick levels and curves check. So curves first, we'll see if we can pull it. You see, at the moment we're pulling the curves now, we're really starting to see all the bad background. So I don't think I will be able to do that. Quick play with the independent colours. So I can move some more red out the background, but not a lot without damaging the image. So I'm going to move that up just 2. With the green, it's really the brightness the green is. So again, 2 I can take out of that. And blue, if I take the blue up, I just end up with a greener image. So 4 I can get away with on the blue. So it's nice. I'd quite like to make it a bit brighter. So I'm going to go to the dodge tool, and I will use a couple 100 pixel brush on shadows, and exposure's at 13%. I'm going to leave that there. So I'm just going to give it a light touch here and see if I can get away with that. Before, after. So you lose a little bit of the contrast by doing this, but it is a nicer, brighter image. In terms of zoom, it won't tolerate a lot more than this final picture. It's due to the nature of a few things, not least of which is the focal length of the scope. It's a 600mm scope in focal length, but it also has a focal reducer of 0.85 on it as well. I'll have a quick play with selective colour to see if I can do any more with the centre. Okay, astro pictures are literally the worst kind for me. Every time I go back to them, I end up re-editing them I don't like it. I don't like how much red there is in the background. I don't like how speckly it is. Don't like how much green there is in the background. So I'm just going to tweak a few things. I'll start with levels, and I'll pull the red up quite aggressively and the green up as well. Okay, I'm going to go select color range, and I'm going to select the black, and then you drag this fuzziness slider to decide how much stuff you're selecting. And I'm going to get most of the black stuff, and then I'm going to turn off the selection edges. View show edges off. Now with that, if I zoom in and make a change, I'm dealing with quite a lot of the image, and I'm going to try and use that to blur out some of the pixelation I've got. So I'll do a Gaussian blur, and we'll have a look at various bits of the image. Okay, so that's a 2.6 pixel blur, and it doesn't look terrible on the transition. So I'll put the edges back on the selection, which is insane. So it's not affected the stars, it's not affected the main subject. I'm now deselecting everything, so I'm going to select just the center object, and I'm going to duplicate the layer and give it a layer mask based on that selection. So we're only affecting that one small bit. And I'm going to use the blur tool, and I'm just going to try and tidy these up a bit. Okay, so we're going to zip in and just tweak these a little bit, just to make them a bit smoother. I've been quite careful just to do specific parts of the image. I don't want to lose the definition around the center. It's only these surrounding bits where we've got a little bit of pixelation that I don't want. So I'll see if I can boost the image a bit. That's quite nice. So I've left the background alone by putting this first point in. The way you do that, when you pull up curves, you can click a point on the line to lock it in a place and then manipulate further up the image. So I'm dealing with the midsection of the image rather than the bottom section, and that's really where the target shines. Then I can do a quick overall boost to the curve, and it will naturally fade out and bring up the background as well. So I think that's nicer. Possibly even go a little further than that. One more quick selective color. So I'm going to save this as my first JPEG, which is my first iteration of this picture. I sometimes get up to over 100 iterations of a picture before I'm happy with it. But I'll give that a moment, come back to it and see if I like the image. Okay, coming back to it, there's a little bit too much red in, so I'm just going to go to curves and then red, and just pull that down a tiny bit. I want to make sure I get the red from the background, not the center of the image. That's better. Okay, and I might do the same thing on green actually. Green's not working so well, I'll leave that alone. Okay, I'll save that as 2. My second JPEG. Now, if we have a quick look over the previous 11 versions of this picture, up at the top left here, this was my first ever go, and I was really pleased with that at the time. It was a big success for the equipment that I got. From there, we moved on to a bit of a blobby mess, to be honest. Things started getting good on my third attempt, and it may be that equipment changed or I just learned a little bit more. We started to get some detail, and experimenting with different ways of doing things. Then all of a sudden we had a bit of a step change in equipment, and started to get some really nice pictures coming out. And then that was probably a bad night, I think, rather than bad equipment. This is quite nice. And then that was the last one. Now this one's a bit special. The image we've generated today, which is this one, is not as good and as crisp as this one. How come? Well, this was taken with a 12-inch Newtonian reflector, 300 PDS from Skywatcher, which is 40 kilos and it's almost as tall as I am. It's a big telescope. The resolution you get out of a telescope like that is a significant improvement over the ED80 that we're using here, with a focal length that's half as much. So with half the focal length here, you're never going to get this level of detail on a picture. I actually bought that telescope just to take that picture. But that said, I'm quite happy with this from the ED80. It's a perfectly good attempt, and I think I will call that the final image for this video. So I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. It's slightly different to the last nebula we took, but a lot of the principles are the same. If you do like this content, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.